Okay, guys, it's time for us to start talking about Chapter 5, Length of Stay, which you had a little mini introduction to average length of stay in Chapter 4. I've always thought it was kind of strange that they introduced ALOS in Chapter 4 before they even talked to you about it in Chapter 5, but hey, we're going to roll with it, and now you're going to, kind of put the horse back in front of the cart now and learn how to do average length of stay so that when you have some of those problems like you had in Chapter 4 that ask for length of stay, you'll be able to calculate it now. So I know that caused some confusion, so again, sorry about that, but unfortunately, that's how the textbook is set up. So you have, again, here at the beginning of Chapter 5, a lot of key terms that your chapter will go over, and they kind of start out at the very bottom of 71. Length of stay is the number of calendar days a patient stays in the hospital. So that seems pretty easy, right? From admission to discharge. And then the textbook goes into how your hospitals are going to utilize length of stay, and a concept called utilization management we'll get to next spring in your quality management class. But really what we're doing with utilization management, I like to call it the Goldilocks principle. So I don't know if you know Goldilocks and the Three Bears or not, but Goldilocks went through the Three Bears' house looking for everything that was just right. The porridge, the beds, anything she was looking for just right. I think that is a good way to explain utilization management. And so what your textbook's trying to explain to you right here is that utilization management is the level of services that your patients receive within the facility, and the easy definition is that it needs to be the just right, like Goldilocks. They need to have just the right amount of services, not too many, not too little, and a part of that determination is length of stay. And so this particular series of paragraphs explains to you how that fits in as far as utilization of services for your patient. And they draw a parallel to payment when they're talking about MSDRGs. And so the long and short of it is if you've got a DRG that pays on a length of stay of, let's say, 5 days, if your patient is in the hospital for that DRG longer than 5 days, then in essence your hospital is losing money, because what we've done is said, okay, so for this particular MSDRG, and we can pick what's fun. Let's pick a hip replacement. So let's say that an MSDRG for a hip replacement says our patients are going to have this certain level of service, and that's notwithstanding any problems that they already bring. So let's say if you've got your patient is suffering from obesity and high blood pressure and diabetes, that may impact their length of stay. But let's just say that in a normal circumstance, notwithstanding any other problems, in essence, me and you, if we went into the hospital for the same diagnosis, should have the same treatment plan and the same length of stay. And so if something happens to me and I stay a little longer and it adjusts the length of stay, then the hospital isn't going to be necessarily paid as much money for that, and so they start to lose money. And I hate to bring it down to money, but a lot of what we deal with sometimes is money, y'all. So let me see if I can adjust this and get all this in here. I'm sorry if that's getting all weird for you. Okie dokie. So that was a long kind of rambling rant about utilization management. So let's hop on down on 72 to discharge days. So it says this chapter discusses discharge days, which are calculated after the patient has been discharged from the hospital. Discharge days, days of stays, inpatient days of stay, and duration of inpatient hospitalization are other terms used for LOS. So that's good to know, right? So we've got a few terms that we could be dealing with. So let's look at the chapter. Again, in the second paragraph, you've got a couple of rules here that you're going to need to follow. And the second paragraph is more of a reminder of what the definition of a discharge is. A discharge occurs at the end of an inpatient stay. Discharges include deaths, so the term discharge may refer to patients who leave the hospital alive and those who have died. Some patients are transferred to other facilities to continue their care. Hospital staff may refer to these patients as transfers, but they are counted as discharges. We know paragraph 2 already. We've been talking about that for a while now, so you understand paragraph 2. So let's get to the rule in paragraph 3. In general, every day that a patient is in the hospital is counted as a day except the day of discharge. And we've talked about this before too, so we'll come back to it in a minute. Length of stay for one patient is determined by subtracting the admission date from the discharge date when the patient is admitted and discharged in the same month. The day of admission is counted in computing, but the day of discharge is not. Okay, so I know this is what your textbook says to do this old mess with subtracting, but I'm going to tell you right now that I see more problems from students with subtracting than I do just doing it the old-fashioned way, which is counting. So I'm going to show you this. Do y'all see my worksheet where I have listed out on the side all the way down to 31? And so what happens there is instead of subtracting, I usually count the days. Sometimes the subtracting doesn't work for students, so if you find that you're getting different answers than what your book gives or maybe what I give on the worksheets, one of the first questions I'll ask you is, have you been using the subtracting method, even though that's what your book says? So that's just kind of a heads up there. So let's take a look at table 5.1. I know sometimes we don't look at the tables, but this is a pretty good one. So your examples for length of stay calculation, date admitted 9/25, date discharge 9/25. We know that as an A and D, right? We've been talking about those people that come and go in the same day in between census taking time. So we know those people exist. We're not going to use a half a day or a partial day. We're just going to think of them as a full day because they utilize services. So if we're talking about same day admission 9/25 to date of discharge 9/26, we're going to count the day of admission and not the day of discharge, so those folks are one day also. 9/25 to 9/30, you've got 5 days because you're going to count the day of admission. And look, I'm going to bring my piece of paper over here so I can show you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm not counting the day of discharge. So 5 days. 9/25 to 10/4, 9 days. You'll see me break it down like this also. How many days they had in September plus how many days they had in October. Now they're also using the subtraction method, y'all. So this is where it would look a little different. Mine would say those 6 days in September and 3 days in October, which is completely confusing, but we'll get to it. So my way and their way works. It's just sometimes I see students making errors with the subtraction. And then how it's broken down here again is mostly what I want you to see. The easiest way to organize yourself when you've got a stay that starts in one month and it discharges in a different month, just count the days for the individual months and then add them together. All right, so let's move on to 5.1 where it asks for the length of stay. So admitted and discharged, you're going to count 1 day for length of stay, right? So they count the day of discharge and not the day, the day of admission and not the day of discharge for 1 day. 9/12 to 9/22. I'm going to pull my piece of paper out. So we've got 9/12 is the day of admission. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days. Because we're not going to count the day of discharge. You may be like, Heather, well, I subtracted and got the same number you did. Good, because it's in the same month, and that rule works best there. So 3/10 to 3/24, you're going to count again, and hopefully you came up with 14. And so 6/17 to 7/18. So let's take a look at that. So that is 6/17 to 7/18. So in the month of June, we're going to count the day of admission, and we know that June has 30 days. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 days in June. And then in July, if this is the 18th day, we know we're going to have 17 days in July for a total of 31 days. If you have this answer in the back of the textbook, they're going to show 13 days in June and 18 days in July for 31 days. So see, you can still get it, but you don't follow the rule if you do the subtraction. And the rule is important. Following the rule over here on page 72. Count the day of admission, don't count the day of discharge. And I know some of you are thinking, like, good Lord, I hope she doesn't sit there and count on her piece of paper the whole time. So I'm not going to do that. But just getting started, I wanted to make sure that you guys saw kind of my method. All right, so for exercise 5.2, calculate the LOS for the following discharge patients in this long-term care facility. Keep in mind that 2012 is a leap year, so we know that rule, right? Our book's going to tell us if we're dealing with a leap year, and so we are dealing with a leap year, and I think, let's see here, we've got 1/1/2009, 11/1/2014 for 2130. Let me see if this is in the back of the book, y'all. I can't remember if it's odd or even. Sorry about that. Okay, so you don't have these. You had 5/1. So you hopefully came up with 2130. And then the next one you should have gotten, so it's 2130 for the first one, 633, 209, make sure I'm keeping up, 15, that is not true, good Lord, 408, 408 for 21 to 315, and then the last one, 250. So those are the answers. And these numbers are significantly higher because we're adding in the years. So my advice to you when you are working through these problems, and I'm going to pick one of these and we're going to work through it, but I just wanted to give you the answers to the column first since you don't have it, is that you kind of keep yourself organized by month and year is going to be the easiest way to do it. So let's just pick the last one, 1030. 2013 through 7/7/2014. All right, so if we're starting with October 2013, oh goodness gracious, October, we're going to have 2 days because we know there are 31 days in October, so we're going to count the day of admission and the day of discharge, so we've got 2 days there. Then November, we have 30 days. December, we have 31 days. So that's 2013. And you may say, oh, I'd like to calculate from there. So I'm not, you know, I don't have as many days to do it. It's totally up to you. So this is 2013, and this will be 2014. So that's just kind of how I do it. So at this point, 2013, if we did the math, and so I can do this in my head, but I'll plug it in my calculator since I'm trying to talk and do this at the same time, so don't make any mistakes. Hopefully that adds up to 63. So in 2013, we had 63 days. Now let's work with 2014. 2014, from January to June, I could write out all the months, but you and I both know that's 181 days. Okay? So now let's just tackle July. So we're going to count all the days in July, but the day of discharge. So for July, we have 6 days because the patient is discharged on the 7th. And so if you take 181 plus 6, that's 187. And goodness gracious, I hope 187 plus 63 is 250. And it is. Yay! So that's how you calculate multiple years. And I'm about to run out of time, and we're only through 5.2, so I'll pick back up in the next video.